we ready in the room?
Yeah.
Yeah, sir, please. It's up.
Thank you for being here. I would like to acknowledge that I'm speaking today from the unceded territory of the Anishinaabe Algonquin people. My name is Fareed Khan. I'm the founder of Canadians United Against Hate, and I'm here today with 3 other speakers to mark the International Day of Commemoration of Victims of Genocide and International Human Rights Day, which are taking place on Saturday and Sunday, respectively. Joining me today will be Hala Alshaaer, a Palestinian-Canadian, who is mourning the death of more than 130 members of her extended family killed by Israel in Gaza, as well as Rabbi Joseph Kohn of Neturei Karta, an anti-Zionist Jewish group based in New York City, and Alex Ihama, Executive Director of the Canadian Congress on Inclusivity and Diversity. When the Nazis invaded Poland in 1939, instigating World War II, my late father-in-law was 12 years old. He and his family were Jewish and lived in a town between Warsaw and Krakow with his extended family. Within a few weeks, the Nazis occupied their towns, and most of his family were rounded up and sent to concentration camps in Germany, and those that managed to escape were caught later and imprisoned in the Warsaw Ghetto and other Jewish ghettos and concentration camps. My father-in-law managed to survive internment at Buchenwald, Auschwitz-Birkenau, and Mittelbrau-Dora concentration camps. After the war, he learned he was only one of 4 survivors out of a very large extended family numbering more than 70. It was his experience during the Holocaust that led my late wife to take up the cause of justice for oppressed and persecuted minorities and academic. And if she were alive today, she would be condemning decades of Israeli brutality and oppression against Palestinians. After the war, the United Nations adopted the Genocide Convention to prevent what happened to my father-in-law and other concentration camp victims from ever happening again to others. But as we've seen since the 1940s, genocide has been committed repeatedly. It is being committed again right now by Israel against Palestinians, and Canada and the rest of the world are doing nothing to stop it. Over the past 2 months, Israel has, with deliberate intent, attacked Palestinian civilians and civilian infrastructure, with some Israeli politicians calling for the extermination of all Palestinians in Gaza, and one even suggesting using a nuclear bomb on the territory. In a speech given on October 28th, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu invoked a passage from the Old Testament, which says, "Now go and smite the Amalekites, and utterly destroy all that they have, and spare them not, but slay both man and woman, infant and suckling, ox and sheep, and camel and ass." This genocidal rhetoric barely received acknowledgement, let alone condemnation from Canada and other Western nations. Under Section 2 of the Genocide Convention, the crime of genocide is defined as any one of the following acts committed with intent to destroy, in whole or in part, a national, ethnic, racial, or religious group, including killing members of the group, causing serious bodily harm or mental harm to members of the group, deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part, imposing measures intended to prevent births within the group, and forcibly transferring children of the group to another group. Israel has been committing genocidal crimes against Palestinians for decades with Western complicity. And for the past 2 months, it has been committing 3 of these crimes simultaneously. Yet neither Canada, the US, nor any of their allies are doing anything to stop Israel's campaign of mass murder against a defenseless people. The question is why? The only reason that makes sense is a deliberate policy of anti-Palestinian racism and hate within the political ecosystems of Canada and other Western nations and within these societies. Compare this response to how Canada responded to Russia's attack on Ukraine. The same crimes that Russia committed against Ukrainians are being committed by Israel against Palestinians. But while Russia has been repeatedly condemned and sanctioned, No such actions or words have been taken, are forthcoming against Israel, even though Palestinian deaths are more than double those of the Ukrainians within the last 2 months, whereas Ukrainian deaths have occurred over almost 22 months. The contrast in response couldn't be more stark, with the only difference being that Ukrainians are white and Christian, and Palestinians are racialized and largely Muslim. Hundreds of thousands of Canadians of all faiths and backgrounds have demonstrated in the streets weekly for the past 2 months, along with millions around the world demanding a ceasefire. But even though Palestinian deaths have surpassed 21,000 according to the human rights group Euromed, with almost 9,000 of them being children, Justin Trudeau still refuses to demand a ceasefire, even though 71% of Canadians support one, according to recent polls. If his father, Pierre Trudeau, were alive today, I think he would be ashamed at his son's lack of humanity. Liberal and conservative politicians often say Canada is a rule of law nation, a defender of the international legal order. Those statements have proven to be blatant lies based on Canada's lack of reaction to the genocide of Palestinians. We're calling on Justin Trudeau, Pierre Poilievre, and the MPs in their respective parties to find some small shred of humanity within them for Palestinians as we enter a month that focuses on peace and goodwill. So we're calling on all parliamentarians to support the following actions. 1, that Canada immediately begin working with the UN to implement a ceasefire and permit unrestricted humanitarian aid into Gaza. 2, that Canada and other Western nations invoke the doctrine of responsibility to protect, a doctrine that was co-authored by Canada to defend Palestinian civilians from Israeli aggression. 3, that the Canadian government and parliamentarians officially recognize Israel's crimes against the Palestinian people as genocide. 4, that Canada work with the UN to bring to trial before the International Criminal Court the political and military leaders in this war under charges of committing war crimes, crimes against humanity, and genocide. And that Canada make a sincere, concerted effort through the UN and other forums to end more than half a century of a brutal Israeli occupation of Palestinian lands, which is the ultimate source of the decades of tragedy leading to what we are seeing today. And finally, I'd like to call attention to the epidemic of McCarthyism that we are seeing across Canada over the past 2 months as it relates to this war. People who've spoken out for Palestinian rights, condemned Israel for mass murder and genocide, who have used social media to share information favorable to Palestinians, are being intimidated, harassed, doxxed, and fired from their jobs for standing up for the humanity of a defenseless people. Doctors, contract workers, and even those on minimum wage have been fired from their jobs. Even Canadian journalists are being threatened and fired, and their freedom to tell the truth about the leaders of Israel who are committing genocide is being suppressed by news media executives under threat of sanction, with CTV journalists being told they can't even use the word Palestine. This is happening to thousands of people across the country simply for defending Palestinian rights, and they're being unjustly accused of being anti-Semitic for expressing their humanity. We are living in a very dangerous moment in time, and all Canadians of conscience have to raise their voices in defense of human rights. Because if we fail to protect Palestinians today, as their rights are egregiously violated, a people who are now the most persecuted minority in the world, it will be at the price of a world governed by barbarity, brutality, and the highest form of injustice, similar to when the Nazis began the extermination of 6 million Jews. Canadians will not forget this moment and the lack of humanity, cowardice, and gutless behavior shown by Justin Trudeau, Pierre Poilievre, and their MPs. They have chosen to give in to anti-Palestinian racism, hate, and Islamophobia. Canadians will remember, and we will make sure that both these ultra-white, ultra-privileged men and their parties pay the heaviest price possible politically. I would now like to call on Hala Alshaaer to speak.
Exactly 1 month ago today, on November 8th, I stood up here urging our government officials to take immediate action and call for a permanent ceasefire. At the time, my personal tragedy weighed heavily on my shoulders, having lost 86 of my family members. Today, I stand here filled with so much pain and grief that I haven't been able to process to let you know that in this last month, this number has almost doubled, with it now becoming over 130 between both sides of my family, 81 alone from my mother's side, and over 40 being children. Less than 48 hours ago, 7 more of my family members were killed by an Israeli airstrike. And I don't want to say that we're only numbers, so I'm going to tell you some of their names and ages. It was a mother and a father and their 5 daughters. Layla El-Agha, 25 years old. Iman El-Agha, 22 years old. Fatma El-Agha, 20 years old. Amal El-Agha, 19 years old. And Ahlam, which means dream in Arabic, she was 7 years old. Gaza, I feel so broken. Please take care of my people, my resilient people, the mothers that carry their children for 9 months, knowing that one day they might be forced to bury their babies. The fathers that are doing everything possible to protect their families in the absolute worst of circumstances, and the children who deserve a chance at life and basic human rights, who deserve electricity, who deserve water, who deserve to go to school without the fear of being blown up. I can't describe to you how heavy my heart is, but I feel compelled to shed a light upon the ongoing tragedy that is unfolding in Gaza. It is a moment in history that calls for our immediate attention and resolute action against the grave violations of human rights and the horrifying genocide being perpetrated by a terrorist regime right before our eyes. In recent years, the Palestinian people have carried the burden of unimaginable suffering and systematic oppression under the barbaric occupation forces. Homes have been destroyed and communities have been razed to the ground and families have been torn apart. Countless lives have been lost, leaving behind a trail of sorrow and despair that we are still trying to heal from. We must ask ourselves, how can we remain silent in such blatant violations of human rights? How can we turn a blind eye to the murder of innocent civilians, to the dreams shattered, and to the entire community being forced into a state of perpetual fear and displacement? We cannot justify the indiscriminate killing, maiming, and displacement of innocent civilians, especially children who have become the unwilling victims of the horrific war crimes committed by the occupation. It is our duty to educate ourselves about the realities on the ground and seek justice for those who have been wronged. We must amplify their voices and shed light on the atrocities that are being committed. We must call upon our governments to take decisive actions to end this horrific attack on the children of Gaza. Let us remember our shared humanity knows no borders. The suffering of one is the suffering of all. The time has come to unite regardless of our differences and advocate for justice, equality, and the complete liberation and freedom of Palestine. The legacy we leave behind will be judged not by our silence, but by our actions. We must act with urgency and determination to end the genocide and human rights violations happening in Gaza. I've said this before and I'm going to say it again. The time to act is now. Yesterday's ceasefire could have prevented the murder of the victims of today. Gaza, I love you so much and I can't wait to reunite with you. My heart bleeds when you suffer, and the pain that we all feel of not being able to help you because we are very, very far away is very heavy. But we will not stop, and I will not stop. You taught us that no matter what, and no matter how much we are hurting, we need to stay strong. I know that I will see you free and liberated soon, inshallah. Please pray for my people. Please pray for my family. This genocide must end. Thank you.
Thank you, Hala. I would now like to call on Rabbi Joseph Kohn to speak remotely.
We are here to join the call to the Canadian government to take a firm stance in support of Palestinian human rights. As we are all witnessing, if you just heard first-hand account, the horrific genocidal war on Gaza, and we are so outraged and disturbed. Our organization comprises of religious Jews in Canada and around the world who have been opposed to Zionism from the very beginning, more than 100 years ago, and continue to oppose it till today. Why? There is a great difference between Judaism and Zionism. Judaism is a religion, thousands of years old, subservious to the Almighty, not a nationality. Zionism is a new philosophy, a political one that misuses Torah and our religion for their own benefit. According to our religion, Jews are in exile by divine decree and may not do anything by all means to end this exile. Judaism clearly forbids killing, stealing, and occupying. All of these crimes that Israel commits goes in direct violation of our religion. Now, Israel has the audacity to use my religion to commit all their crimes. There was peace in Palestine prior to the creation of the State of Israel, before Zionism came to Palestine. This is not a religious conflict between Jews and Muslims. Zionism is the root cause of all the bloodshed in Palestine for over 75 years now, and continues to be the only impediment to peace. And we hope and pray for the peaceful dismantlement of this entity, which is the obstacle to peace. We urge the government to stand up for Palestine. Standing up for Palestine is the right thing and is important to save the lives of innocent people. In no way can we expect that calling for the end of a genocidal war, calling for the end of an occupation, of a brutal 75-year occupation, would be called anti-Semitic in any way. Anti-Zionism is not the same as anti-Semitism and shouldn't be used to intimidate those kind people who stand up in support of Palestinian human rights. Israeli Prime Minister misusing my Torah, my religion, to justify these crimes, misquoting parts of the Torah. In no case should my religion be used to justify a genocide or to justify silence in the midst of a genocide. Again, we encourage the Canadian government to take a firm stance to work towards freedom and justice for Palestine and to bring an end to the occupation of Palestine. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Kohn. I would now like to call on Alex Ihama to speak remotely.
As we gather to commemorate the International Day for victims of the crime of genocide and the prevention of this crime, followed by the Human Rights Day, which is coming up on Sunday, we are calling upon everybody not just to remember, but to reflect and, of course, to learn and to act. Throughout history, humanity has been scarred. Humanity has been scarred with genocide, a haunting reminder of our collective failures to protect the innocent. From the Holocaust to the tragic events in Rwanda, countless other examples, these atrocities stand as stark testimonies to the consequences of silence, of indifference, and of inaction. Therefore, we come to honor the memories of millions who fell victim to these unspeakable crimes, and we recognize the wounds that continue to ache in survivors and their descendants. It is a solemn duty for everyone to remember, but it is an even greater obligation to prevent such horrors from occurring and reoccurring. The United Nations designation of these days serve as a beacon, urging everybody to strive for a world that is free of genocide and of human rights abuses. Yet, there remains much to be done, or else we won't be here today. We implore the international community, therefore, especially this fine nation of Canada, to fortify its mechanisms, to tighten regulations, and to ensure equity and fairness in resolving global conflicts, while nations hold the right to defend their sovereignty, it is imperative to safeguard the innocent. And that goes without question. Regrettably, though, recent wars and conflicts bear witness to the stark reality where the vulnerable suffer the most. The ongoing strife in Gaza is a poignant reminder of the urgency to protect the innocent and amid geopolitical tensions. According to the New York Times, I just checked that out this morning, civilians are being killed at historic pace, unprecedented. Even, the conservative report is indicating a very unfair assessment of the situation, very unfair assessment of the situation. And the figure shows that the rate of death during this unfortunate assault has few precedents in century. In century, experts have said. Reuters claim that about 20,000 Palestinians have been killed since the onset versus the 1,200 people in the violent incursion into Israel, according to Israeli tallies. I'm quoting from the newspaper directly. They went to say that aid agency warned that a humanitarian disaster in Gaza is worsening by the hour, with most of its 2.3 million people homeless and trapped in a tiny embattled coastal enclave with little food, water, medical care, fuel, or secure shelter. No end is in sight as death toll rises in Gaza and Israel escalates attacks, says BBC and Al Jazeera together. This is a call, therefore, not just to the leaders of nations, but to every citizen with a voice, a plea for advocacy, for justice, and support for the victims. Let us not be complacent or silent in the face of injustice. History tells us, in the words of Edmund Burke, that the only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good people to do nothing. Therefore, to nations claiming superpower status, like the United States, like Canada, like the United Kingdom, it is time to call for fairness and impartiality in their assessment, in their support, and in the aids they offer to these warring parties. It is time to hold accountable those in positions of influence and power, urging them to prioritize humanity over geopolitical interest. Over our voices united can reverberate for change. Let's amplify, therefore, our advocacy, extend our hands to the victims, and demand accountability from those responsible for ensuring global peace and justice. On this day of remembrance and reflection, let's honor the victims. Let's learn from history's lessons, and let's pledge ourselves to a future where dignity and rights of every individual are upheld and protected. As we plan to celebrate Human Rights Day on Sunday, December 10th, let us amplify our voices for a ceasefire and the equitable distribution of human hate. Let us stand for justice and human rights and strengthen our voices to protect the innocent, the women, and the children who are being slaughtered with military might far too sophisticated for the conflict on the ground. In the response to the Vietnam War, Martin Luther King said, we must find new ways to speak for peace, for justice throughout the developing world, a world that borders on our doors. If we do not act, Martin Luther King said, we shall surely be dragged down the long, dark, and shameful corridor of time, reserved for those who possess power without compassion, might without morality, and strength without sight. He continued by saying, world peace through non-violent means is neither absurd nor unattainable. All other methods have obviously failed. Therefore, we must begin anew. Those of us who believe in this method can be voices of reason, sanity, and understanding amid the voices of violence, of hatred, and emotion. We can very well set a new mode of peace, out of which a system of peace can be built. At the Canadian Congress here, we exist to be a voice that will linger for generations, advocating for love, for kindness, for unity, and the human rights and civil liberties of Canadians and humanity as a whole, while empowering people, corporations, institutions, communities, and yes, the government to foster equity, inclusive diversity as well. This is why we have added our voice to this call for decisive action on the part of the Canadian government to act with love, compassion, kindness, and equity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alex. We will now accept questions.
Great, thanks. Hi, I was wondering if I could just start with Hala, if that's okay. Thank you for your testimony. I know that's not easy to talk about at all. I was wondering if you could tell us, do you still have family in Gaza at the moment, and how are they doing? Are you in touch with them?
The situation is horrible. We are in touch with them as much as we can be. Sometimes we don't hear from them for days. My whole extended family is there. All of my father's siblings are there. We do still have family there, and it's beyond anything that we can imagine. Everything that you're seeing on TV and everybody's watching on TV or on Instagram or on social media, multiply it by 10. There are a lot of things that aren't even being filmed or aren't even being showed right now. There's no food. People are literally starving. Even if they're able to get money, there's nothing to buy. The situation is absolutely horrific there. My dad's brother, the other day, he put his kids to sleep, and him and his wife went into their room, and 10 minutes later, there was an airstrike right behind their building. Their front door split in half, and when my uncle went to the rooftop of their building, he was describing the horrific scenes he was seeing. He's like, I'm seeing body parts all over, a head thrown somewhere, an arm, a leg. People are literally exploding into pieces. So whatever we think that we're seeing and we're watching in the comfort of our own homes behind phone screens, multiply the atrocities by 10. It's terrible.
Thank you for that. And for whoever wants to weigh in, I know you're all calling for Canada to call for a permanent ceasefire. How much international weight do you think Canada has in doing that? What difference would it make if Canada did that?
Yeah, sure. Someone has to go first. We've had non-Western nations call for a ceasefire. The Deputy Prime Minister of Belgium said that Israel should be sanctioned for the crimes it's committing. Some of the Nordic nations have called for a ceasefire. Canada is one of the G7 nations, so it's one of the prominent nations in the world. And frankly, right now, I'm ashamed to be Canadian, because what we see is a leadership, regardless of political stripe, across the board, where for years they have stood up on Holocaust, Genocide Remembrance Day and Holocaust Remembrance Day and said never again. And right now, when it is happening again, they are basically saying, yeah, Israel's fine defending itself, even though we know that an occupying power cannot claim the right to self-defense. So if Canada were to stand up and say that, no, we demand a ceasefire and we will work with the United Nations and other countries, then I think, yeah, they're going to be condemned, like Israel is going to attack them to no end. And they might upset, the string pullers in Washington, D.C. But I think it needs to be done, because where is the humanity? Where's the humanity? Would anybody else like to weigh in on that? Rabbi, Alex?
I mean, let me echo what you've already said there, Farid. When the reporter was asking the question, I was just thinking to myself, of course Canada has a voice. Of course Canada has influence. Of course Canada is not just a member of the G7 or G8, but a powerful nation in the world. But the challenge is we sometimes have an issue in the country of being fair, of being equitable, of being just. We don't even have to look out to Gaza. We can look within our backyard right here with indigenous people and, of course, the Black and minoritized group. So this is a call, it's not a new call, but we are reinforcing an existing call for our nation, which we love so much, to be fair and to actually stand and, as they say, stand for the justice that we claim to have here.
Rabbi, would you like to weigh in? If not, I'll go to the next question.
I can say that Canada has its own powerful voice and will definitely have an echo effect on the USA and other countries.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thanks. So, just still on, I guess, on the topic of the ceasefire, Farid, what do you make of high-ranking Muslim donors saying that they're going to pull back from donating to the Liberal Party over Justin Trudeau's lack of call for a ceasefire?
Well, I'm very glad to hear that news, because I don't think that anybody within the Muslim community who broadly supported the Liberals in 2015 and the last two elections are going to be supporting the Liberals again. And the fact that the donors have pulled out should tell you volumes, because these are prominent people and voices within the Muslim community across Canada. And the fact that they have pulled out, I think, sends a massive signal. And if I remember what was written in the story covering this, the Muslim community now across Canada is approaching 2 million people. You add Palestinians and Arabs generally into that, it's probably about 2.3 million. And we have long memories. We will not forget this betrayal. And frankly, in this case, both the Liberals and the Conservatives are exactly the same. There is no difference. So while Justin Trudeau is in government right now, we have no hope that Pierre Poilievre would do any better. In fact, we think he would do worse. His rhetoric and the rhetoric of his MPs have basically shown that there is deeply embedded Islamophobia and anti-Palestinian racism within that party. And so we will remember this. And the donors have said that they're going to direct their funds to other candidates, NDP and Green candidates. And I think that you will see a massive shift in voting patterns in the next election.
Do you worry at all that were there to be a ceasefire, we've heard Hamas leadership say they would commit multiple other October 7ths, in the sense that they would like to continue what they did that day, and I guess rendering the ceasefire untenable because of that kind of...
Well, the ceasefire is just a starting point. It's not the be-all and end-all. The ceasefire is a starting point. The goal is to end an occupation, a brutal, violent, aggressive, racist occupation of a people who are the most persecuted people in the world today, where we are seeing deeply embedded racism in the government and media ecosystems of Western nations. So the ceasefire is a starting point. As for Hamas, you know what? The only thing I have to say is, and I said it in my remarks, that anybody who committed crimes against humanity, war crimes, genocide, they need to be charged, brought before the International Court, tried, and punished. And I don't care which side that's from. Okay, the fact is, right now, we have a death toll over 21,000 civilians who have been killed. Almost 9,000 of them have been children. And we are still quibbling about calling for a ceasefire in this country? I'm sorry, that's just reprehensible.
Can I just get your thoughts on this other story? It's kind of just breaking now, but the RCMP have arrested 2 men after an investigation of 2 years. They say these men have been promoting terror online and have even been in recruitment videos for the Atomwaffen division. So they're charging them with terror-related charges. What do you make of this?
Well, I'm glad to hear that there's still ongoing investigation of these white supremacist groups in this country. In fact, white supremacy is a bigger threat in Canada than any other sort of extremism. And we continually hear about anti-Semitism over the last couple of months, but it's been happening before October 7th. And the main perpetrators of anti-Semitism in this country are these white supremacist groups, neo-Nazis, and the ecosystem that they work in. So the fact that there are still ongoing efforts within the justice system to find these people, to charge them and bring them to justice, I think is a positive development, and I hope that those efforts continue. Okay. Are there any remote questions?
There's no remote questions.
Okay. Well then, thank you very much. Thank you, Rabbi Kohn. Thank you, Alex, and thank you, Hala, for being here this morning. And I hope that this story resonates because we're entering Christmas. It's supposed to be a month of peace and brother and sisterhood, and we are not seeing that, and we're certainly not seeing that from our political officials with regard to this conflict. Thank you.
God bless.
Okay. Thank you, Alex. Thank you, Rabbi.
Yeah, thank you. God bless you all.